Last month, I stood at the edge of Franklin's glitziest gala, watching my brother Ethan's fraud scandal unravel. My family always branded me the nobody, the failure who'd never match Ethan's shine. But then the mayor locked eyes with me and gasped into the mic. "Wait, you're the senator?" The room froze. My parents' jaws dropped like they'd seen a ghost. Sweet justice hits like a freight train, doesn't it? If you've ever been dismissed by those who should have had your back, stick around. Hit like, subscribe, and let's dive into how I turned my city's head. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, from Franklin, Oregon, a coastal town where status is king. My dad, Robert, runs a hotel empire. My mom, Catherine, designs mansions for the elite. They demanded perfection. Ethan, my younger brother, was their star Stanford grad investment fund hotshot, always center stage. Me? I was the letdown, chasing pointless community projects. "Why can't you be like Ethan?" was my childhood's chorus. At 13, I saved Franklin's beach with 1,000 signatures. Dad called it cute. In high school, I stood up for a bullied kid, ticking off a family friend's son. Mom snapped, "You're embarrassing us." I loved politics, but Dad sneered, "It's for dreamers who can't make real money." Ethan's ventures got their cash. My passions got their scorn. When I won a national award for coastal protection, Mom called it a hobby. I built a career in the shadows, rising to state senator, but they never noticed. Stick with me to see how I proved them wrong and made them face the truth in front of everyone. You just heard how my family's world flipped when the mayor of Franklin, Oregon, outed me as a state senator at a gala, shattering their narrative of me as the family nobody. That moment was years in the making, built on a childhood of being sidelined for my brother Ethan's spotlight. Let's rewind to where it all started. In a town where your last name could open doors or lock you out. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, raised in Franklin, a coastal gem where success isn't just a goal, it's a religion. My dad, Robert, built a hotel empire that dots the Oregon coast, pulling in millions annually. My mom, Catherine, designs luxury homes for tech moguls and celebrities. Her name splashed across glossy magazines. In Franklin, the Harper name carried weight, and my parents wielded it like a scepter. They expected their kids to be trophies, polished and perfect. Ethan, 3 years younger, was their golden boy from the jump. He was the kid who aced every test, charmed every room, and had Stanford scouts calling by 10th grade. His report cards hung on our fridge like museum exhibits. Me? I was the shadow, the kid who'd rather organize beach cleanups than chase straight A's. "Why can't you be like Ethan?" Wasn't just a question, it was the soundtrack of my youth, playing on repeat at every family dinner. I wasn't failing by normal standards. In middle school, I kept a B+ average, joined the debate team, and spent weekends volunteering at the local food bank. But in the Harper household, second place was as good as last. My parents had a vision. Ethan would conquer the business world, and they never quite figured that out. "Olivia's creative," my 6th grade teacher once told them. "She sees the world differently, connects dots others miss." That night, I overheard Mom scoff. "Creative doesn't get you into Harvard." Ethan's path was paved with their praise and their checkbook. Mine was a dirt road I had to carve myself. 13, I got my first taste of what I could do. Franklin's City Council planned to bulldoze our public beach for a resort. I rallied classmates, knocked on doors, and collected 1,000 signatures to save it. We won. The beach still stands today. Dad called it a cute little project at a cocktail party, chuckling with his buddies. Mom didn't even mention it. Ethan's science fair trophy from that same month? That got a full spread in the family Christmas card. The real sting came in high school. A new kid, Maria, showed up with second-hand clothes and a quiet smile. A clique of rich girls, led by the daughter of Dad's biggest client, targeted her, mocking her faded backpack in the cafeteria. I stepped in, voice steady. "Back off, or I'm telling the principal exactly who's behind this." The leader smirked. "What's it to you, Harper?" I sat with Maria every day after that. When Mom found out, she was livid. "You're making enemies of the wrong people," she hissed. Ethan would have handled it diplomatically. That night I cried, wondering why doing the right thing felt so wrong. Stick with me to see how those moments fueled a fire that carried me to the state senate, and a reckoning my family never saw coming. You've heard how my family pegged me as the nobody next to my brother Ethan's golden glow, dismissing my passion for community work as a waste of time. Those early years in Franklin, Oregon, weren't just about surviving their constant comparisons. They shaped a fire in me that burned brighter than their scorn. Let's dive deeper into the moments that made me, Olivia Harper, 34, fight for my place, even when my own parents bet against me. Growing up in the Harper household, every day felt like an audition I couldn't win. Ethan's trophies lined our mantle, each one proof of his destiny to outshine us all. My efforts? They barely registered. At 14, I organized a fundraiser for Franklin's crumbling community center, rallying 200 locals to raise $20,000. The center got a new roof, and the mayor shook my hand at a town hall. I raced home, thinking maybe this time Mom and Dad would see me. Instead, Dad glanced up from his newspaper and muttered, "Nice hobby, Olivia. Ethan just got early acceptance to a Stanford summer program." Mom didn't even look up from her phone. That night, I stared at my ceiling, wondering if I'd ever be enough. High school brought sharper stings. My junior year, I joined a city task force to protect Franklin's wetlands from overdevelopment. I spent weekends knee-deep in mud, collecting data with volunteers. Our report stopped a corporate land grab, saving 10 acres of habitat. The local paper ran a front-page story, calling me a young leader to watch. I slipped a copy onto the kitchen table, heart pounding with hope. Mom skimmed it, then sighed. "This is sweet, but Ethan's interning at a top investment firm this summer. That's real impact." Ethan, sitting across from me, smirked and said, "Wetlands? Sounds like you're playing in the dirt." I bit my tongue, but the hurt cut deep. Their words weren't just dismissive, they were a verdict. I'd never measure up. The final blow came at 16, during a school assembly. A senior, Jake, was harassing a freshman girl, Sarah, over her second-hand jacket. I stood up in the gym, voice shaking but clear. "Leave her alone or I'm reporting you to the principal." Jake, whose dad golfed with mine, laughed. "Mind your business, Harper." I reported him anyway and he got suspended. Word got back to my parents and at dinner Dad slammed his fork down. "You stirred up trouble with the Wilsons? For some girl you don't even know?" Ethan would have smoothed things over. Mom chimed in. "You're too impulsive, Olivia. Learn from your brother." I pushed my plate away, tears burning, and said, "I did what was right." Dad scoffed. "Right doesn't pay the bills." That night, I vowed to stop chasing their approval. I'd built something they couldn't ignore. Those moments, saving the community center, fighting for the wetlands, standing up for Sarah, weren't just battles with my family's expectations. They were the roots of a career that took me to the state senate. My parents saw my work as childish, but I saw a purpose worth fighting for. Stick with me to see how I turned their doubts into a legacy that shook Franklin to its core. You've seen how my childhood in Franklin, Oregon, was a battle against my family's dismissal. How saving the wetlands and standing up for Sarah forged a purpose they couldn't see. Those moments weren't just fights. They were the foundation of a path that led me to the state senate. I'm Olivia Harper, 34. And this is where I stopped begging for their approval and started building a legacy. Let's dive into the years that turned my fire into action, even as my parents bet on my brother Ethan's star. High school graduation marked a shift. Ethan, 3 years younger, was already courted by elite colleges, his future gilded with our parents' money and connections. Me? I earned a partial scholarship to the University of Oregon, a solid school 90 miles from Franklin. When I shared the news, Mom glanced up from her laptop, designing a tech mogul's beach house. "In-state's fine," she said, her tone flat. Dad, flipping through a hotel revenue report, added, "We're covering Ethan's Stanford tuition. You'll figure it out." The subtext stung. I wasn't worth their investment. I packed my beat-up suitcase, moved to Eugene, and vowed to prove them wrong. Not for their praise but for myself. At the University of Oregon, I majored in political science, drawn to policies that could protect places like Franklin's Coast and people like Sarah. My freshman year, I took a public policy class with Professor Sarah Bennett, a former Portland city councilor who'd fought for affordable housing. After I wrote a 15-page analysis on Oregon's coastal erosion crisis, proposing community-led restoration, she asked me to stay after class. "Olivia," she said, her eyes sharp, "you don't just crunch numbers, you see the human impact. That's rare." Her words were a lifeline the first time anyone saw my mind as a strength. She urged me to join the campus civics club, where I threw myself into organizing. In one semester, I led a voter registration drive that signed up 600 students across Eugene. I emailed my parents a photo of me at the drive, megaphone in hand, hoping for a spark of pride. Dad replied, "Looks busy. Ethan's leading a finance workshop at Stanford." I gritted my teeth, saved the email, and kept pushing. Sophomore year, I heard about a volunteer opportunity on a state representative's campaign in Franklin County. The candidate, Maria Torres, was running on education reform, a cause I cared about. I spent weekends stuffing envelopes, making calls, and knocking on doors in neighborhoods I knew from childhood. Maria won by 2,300 votes, and at the victory party, she pulled me aside. "Your energy flipped precincts, Olivia," she said. "We need people like you." I called Mom, voice shaky with excitement, to share the win. "That's sweet," she said, distracted. "Ethan's interning at a top hedge fund now. Big deal for his resume." I hung up, tears prickling, but Professor Bennett's voice echoed, "You're made for this." I applied for a competitive internship at the Oregon State Capitol in Salem, one of 18 spots chosen from 300 applicants. It was unpaid, requiring a 40-minute bus ride each way, but I juggled it with classes, biking 12 miles daily to save on gas. My supervisor, policy analyst Lena Kim, noticed my ability to simplify complex bills for lawmakers. "You've got a knack for making policy human," she told me. I clung to that even as my family stayed blind to my progress. By junior year, I was drafting a proposal for a state bill to fund coastal restoration, building on my freshman paper. Lena passed it to a senator, and after months of revisions, it became law, protecting 45 miles of Oregon's shoreline from erosion. I mailed a copy of the signed bill to my parents, my heart pounding with hope. No response. At a family dinner I couldn't skip, Dad boasted about Ethan's startup, now valued at $6 million. When I mentioned the bill, Mom waved it off. "That's nice, Olivia. Ethan's meeting with venture capitalists next week." Their indifference was a gut punch, but it also set me free. I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I was chasing impact. Those early steps in Eugene and Salem were the scaffolding of a career my family couldn't imagine. Stick with me to see how I turned that foundation into a fight that shook Franklin and a triumph they couldn't ignore. You've heard how I started carving my path at the University of Oregon, turning my family's doubts into fuel for a career they couldn't see coming. Those early wins, leading voter drives, shaping coastal policy, were just the beginning. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, and this is where the road got tougher, where I fought to keep my dreams alive in Franklin, Oregon, despite empty pockets and a family that bet on my brother Ethan's shine. This chapter of my journey to the state Senate wasn't about glory, it was about grit, and it tested every ounce of my resolve. When I left for college, my parents made it clear their money was for Ethan's Stanford ride, not my practical in-state degree. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but rent, books, and food were on me. By sophomore year I was drowning. I took on 4 jobs to stay afloat: barista at a campus coffee shop, tutor for freshmen, clerk at the library, and weekend waitress at a diner 15 miles from campus. I'd wake at 5 in the morning, bike 10 miles to class, work until midnight, and sleep 3 hours if I was lucky. My grades dipped to a B- average one semester, and I panicked thinking I'd lose my scholarship. But I clawed my way back, taping Professor Sarah Bennett's words to my mirror. "You see people, Olivia. That's your strength." My unpaid internship at the Oregon State Capitol was a game changer, but it stretched me thin. I'd rush from Salem's marble halls to the diner, still in my blazer, smelling of coffee and grease. One night, a regular at the diner, a retired teacher named Clara, noticed my exhaustion. "You're burning out, kid," she said, sliding a $20 tip under my plate. I tried to give it back, but she insisted. "Invest in yourself. You're worth it." I used that 20 to buy a used laptop, which let me draft policy memos faster. That small act of kindness kept me going. At the Capitol, I worked under policy analyst Lena Kim, who trusted me with real responsibility. I researched a bill to fund rural schools, crunching data on 30 districts. When the senator sponsoring it thanked me by name in a committee meeting, I felt seen. I texted my parents a link to the meeting's live stream, hoping they'd care. Mom replied, "Good for you. Ethan's startup just raised $5 million. I deleted the message, but the hurt lingered. Junior year I got a break. Lena recommended me for a paid position as a legislative aide, one of 10 hired from 100 applicants. The job paid $8 an hour, enough to drop the tutoring gig and sleep 4 hours a night. I threw myself into the role, drafting talking points for education reform and meeting with community leaders. One project hit close to home: a proposal to restore Franklin's aging pier, a local landmark. I spent weeks gathering input from fishermen, shop owners, and kids who played there, building a plan that balanced tourism and preservation. The bill passed, securing $2 million for the pier. The Franklin Gazette ran a story, quoting me as a rising star. I mailed the article to my parents, my hands shaking with hope. No response. At Thanksgiving, Dad bragged about Ethan's new condo in San Francisco, worth $1.5 million. When I mentioned the pier, Mom said, "That's nice, Olivia. Ethan's meeting with tech investors next week." I left dinner early, vowing to stop sharing my wins. That vow freed me. I doubled down at the Capitol, earning Lena's trust. She let me lead a presentation to a Senate committee on coastal flooding, a bold move for a 20-year-old intern. I stood before 12 lawmakers, outlining a $10 million resilience plan. The committee chair, Senator Rachel Lee, pulled me aside after. "You've got a future, Olivia," she said. "Don't let anyone dim your light." I called my parents, unable to resist one last try. Dad answered, "Sounds like you're keeping busy. Ethan's company is valued at $20 million now." I hung up, tears falling, but Senator Lee's words burned brighter than their dismissal. By senior year, I was offered a full-time job as a policy analyst for Senator Lee's team. Starting after graduation, I'd be moving to Salem, 60 miles from Franklin, to shape laws that could change lives. I graduated with honors, crossing the stage in a cap and gown I'd paid for myself. My parents attended but left early for Ethan's startup launch party in Portland. I didn't care anymore. I was building something real. Those years of scraping by, juggling jobs, and swallowing my family's indifference forged a strength I didn't know I had. They thought I was chasing a dead end, but I was laying the groundwork for a fight that would shake Franklin. Stick with me to see how I turned that grind into a legacy my parents couldn't ignore, and a moment that flipped their world upside down. You've seen how I scraped by in college, juggling 4 jobs and unpaid internships to build a career my family couldn't be bothered to notice. Those years of grit in Franklin, Oregon, turned me into someone who didn't need their applause to keep going. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, and this is where my quiet wins started piling up, where I became a state senator while my parents still bet on my brother Ethan's flash. But it's also where I faced a storm inside myself, questioning if their rejection would ever stop stinging. This chapter isn't just about climbing. It's about carrying the weight of being invisible to the people who should have seen me first. After graduating from the University of Oregon with honors, I took a full-time job as a policy analyst for Senator Rachel Lee in Salem, 60 miles from Franklin. At 22, I was drafting bills, meeting constituents, and learning the gears of state government. My first big project was a bill to expand broadband to rural Oregon, connecting 15,000 families to high-speed internet. It passed with bipartisan support, and the governor mentioned my name in a press release. I emailed the article to my parents, heart racing, thinking maybe now they'd care. Mom replied, "That's nice, Olivia. Ethan's company just hit a $50 million valuation." I stopped checking their replies after that. A year later, I got a call from Franklin's mayor, Carlin Gwynn. She'd read about my broadband work and needed a policy advisor to tackle the city's housing crisis. "You understand people, Olivia," she said. I moved back to Franklin, working 18-hour days to design a plan that built 2,000 affordable units without gutting the city's charm. The project won a National Urban Planning Award, and at the ceremony, Mayor Gwynn pulled me on stage. "Olivia Harper's vision made this happen," she told 500 attendees. The Franklin Gazette called it a model for coastal cities. I sent my parents an invite to the ceremony, hoping they'd show. They didn't. Dad texted, "Busy with Ethan's investor dinner in Seattle. Sounds like a fun event." I smiled through the applause, but inside I felt hollow. Why did I still want their nod? At 25, I ran for Franklin's City Council, pouring my heart into a campaign about education and sustainability. I knocked on 3,000 doors, shared policy briefs at town halls, and won by 1,200 votes. As a counselor, I led a program to install solar panels on 20 public buildings, cutting energy costs by 30%. The state's environmental coalition gave me their Rising Star Award. I didn't tell my parents about the campaign or the win. At a rare family dinner, Mom asked what I was doing. City council, I said, bracing for their usual brush off. Dad raised an eyebrow. That's quaint. Ethan's fund is managing $200 million now. I nodded, left early, and decided to keep my victories to myself. They didn't deserve to know. By 28, state Democratic leaders approached me to run for the Oregon State Senate. The incumbent was retiring, and they saw me as a fresh voice. I hesitated. The campaign would mean long hours, public scrutiny, and digging up the family drama I'd buried. But Mayor Nguyen and Senator Lee pushed me. "You're ready, Olivia," they said. I ran a scrappy campaign, focusing on climate resilience and school funding. I won by 3,000 votes, becoming one of Oregon's youngest senators at 29. My first bill, a $10 million fund for coastal flood defenses, passed after months of late-night negotiations. The governor signed it at a ceremony in Franklin, shaking my hand. I didn't invite my parents. They didn't know I was a senator. Ethan's latest deal, a $500 million merger, dominated their social media posts. The silence I chose came with a cost. Late at night, I'd lie awake, wrestling with the question: why did their approval still matter? I'd built a career impacting thousands, yet part of me ached for them to see it. I journaled to process the hurt, writing, "I'm enough even if they never say it." But doubt crept in. Was I hiding my success to protect myself or to punish them? That inner storm hit hardest during Franklin's annual Peer Festival, where I spoke as a senator. I scanned the crowd, half hoping to see my parents. They weren't there. Ethan was, though, schmoozing with local bigwigs. He didn't recognize me on the podium. I went home, poured a glass of wine, and cried. Not for their absence, but for the years I'd spent chasing their gaze. Those quiet triumphs and private battles were the bridge to a moment that would flip my family's world. I was a senator shaping Oregon's future, while they worshipped Ethan's empire, an empire about to crumble. Stick with me to see how my brother's fall and my rise collided in a way that shook Franklin to its core. You've seen how I built a career in Franklin, Oregon, stacking quiet wins as a state senator while my family worshipped my brother Ethan's empire, blind to my work. Those years of silent triumphs and inner battles set me up for a moment that would flip their world. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, and this is where my story takes a sharp turn, where Ethan's glittering facade crumbled, and I faced a public storm that tested my principles. This isn't just about my rise. It's about standing firm when the world, and my family, demanded I bend. By 32, I was a respected senator shaping laws on climate and education, but I kept a low profile, letting my work speak louder than my name. My parents still didn't know I was a senator. They were too busy bragging about Ethan's investment fund, now managing $1 billion in assets. His face was on billboards, his name in Forbes, while I was Olivia, doing something in government, as Mom once vaguely put it at a family friend's barbecue. I'd stopped correcting them, but the truth was about to crash through their carefully curated narrative. It started with a late-night call from my chief of staff, Nathan Brooks. "Olivia, turn on the news," he said, voice tight. Breaking headlines screamed, "Ethan Harper, Franklin's golden boy, was under federal investigation for embezzling $25 million from his fund's clients, small businesses, retirees, even a local charity." The news hit Franklin like a tsunami. Social media exploded. Reporters camped outside Ethan's downtown penthouse, and my parents' phones rang off the hook. I watched the coverage from my Salem office 60 miles away, my stomach churning. Ethan wasn't just my brother, he was the Harper family brand, and his fall threatened to drag us all into the mud. The next morning, Mom called, her voice shaking with panic. "Olivia, you have to fix this," she demanded. "You work in government, right? Call someone, pull strings." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I can't interfere with a federal investigation. No one can." She snapped, "Don't give me that. Ethan's your brother. Do something." I kept my voice steady. "The law applies to everyone, even family." She hung up, but not before hissing, "You've always been jealous of him." The media soon sniffed out my connection. A reporter from the Franklin Gazette called, "Senator Harper, any comment on your brother's scandal?" I issued a brief statement. "This is a legal matter. and I trust the process to handle it fairly. But the headlines twisted it. Senator's silence on brother's fraud raises questions. Pundits speculated, was I complicit? Protecting him? My inbox flooded with angry emails, some calling me a hypocrite for championing justice, while my brother dodged it. I refused to play their game. At a press conference in Salem, I faced 30 reporters, cameras flashing like lightning. My role as a senator is to serve Oregon, not to influence federal cases, I said. Justice must be equal for all, no exceptions. The room buzzed, but I stood firm, even as my heart raced. Back home, Dad left a voicemail. You're embarrassing us, Olivia. Ethan needs you, and you're hiding behind speeches. I didn't call back. Their desperation to save Ethan, while ignoring the people he'd hurt, made my blood boil. The crisis peaked when Ethan's fund collapsed, wiping out $50 million in client savings. Protesters gathered outside my parents' mansion, chanting for accountability. A local TV station aired a tearful interview with a retiree who'd lost her life savings to Ethan's scheme. I met with her privately, promising to push for victim restitution laws, but I couldn't undo the damage. My parents doubled down, hiring a top PR firm to paint Ethan as a misguided visionary. They gave interviews never mentioning me, framing themselves as victims of a witch hunt. At a family dinner I couldn't avoid, Dad cornered me. You've got power now, Olivia. Use it. Get Ethan a deal. I looked him in the eye. Power doesn't mean breaking the law, Dad. Ethan made choices and people got hurt. Mom gasped. You're heartless. I left, their words echoing but not breaking me. That public storm wasn't just about Ethan. It forced me to face my own limits. I could pass laws, but I couldn't fix my family's denial. Late nights, I journaled. Am I wrong to let justice run its course? But my oath as a senator to serve without favor held me steady. Ethan's indictment came 3 months later, charges of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction. The trial was set for Franklin's federal courthouse, and the city braced for a spectacle. My parents begged me to attend to show family unity. I refused. I'd face the truth on my own terms, not theirs. That choice led me to a moment that would change everything. A moment where Franklin and my family saw me for who I'd become. Stick with me to see how Ethan's downfall and my rise collided in a gala that shook our city to its core. You've heard how my brother Ethan's fraud scandal rocked Franklin, Oregon, and how I stood my ground as a state senator, refusing to bend justice for family despite their pleas. That public storm set the stage for a moment that would rewrite my story in their eyes. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, and this is where everything collided. Where my quiet rise met their loud denial in a single earth-shaking instant at a gala that left Franklin reeling. The weight of Ethan's downfall, and my choice to let the law run its course, led me to a night no one saw coming. Ethan's federal indictment for embezzling $25 million was the talk of Franklin. His trial loomed, and my parents, Robert and Catherine, leaned hard into their PR campaign, painting him as a misunderstood genius. They never mentioned me, their senator daughter, in their teary interviews, still clinging to the myth of Ethan as the family star. I kept my distance, focusing on my work, pushing a bill for victim restitution to help the retirees and small businesses Ethan's fund had gutted. But Franklin's annual Citizen Awards Gala, honoring community leaders, pulled me back into the spotlight I'd avoided. I decided to attend the gala, not as Senator Harper, but as Olivia, a Franklin native supporting my town. I wore a simple navy dress, no name tag, and slipped into a back row seat at the convention center, where 500 people filled tables glittering with candlelight. The air buzzed with whispers about Ethan's scandal. My parents, seated up front with Ethan, drew curious stares. Mayor Carlin Gwynn took the stage to present the Environmental Leadership Award for a coastal protection project I'd championed as a senator. The project, securing 30 miles of shoreline, had earned national praise. I clapped quietly as the mayor described its impact, unaware she'd soon turn my world upside down. This initiative transformed Franklin, she said, scanning the crowd. Her eyes landed on me and her face froze. The mic caught her stunned whisper. Wait, you're the senator? The room erupted. 500 heads swiveled, cameras flashed, and a tidal wave of murmurs swept through. My parents whipped around, their jaws dropping like they'd seen a ghost. Ethan, pale in his tailored suit, gaped, his fork clattering to his plate. Reporters scribbled furiously, Phones lit up with live tweets. Senator Harper at gala, Ethan's sister? For a moment I sat still, heart pounding, as the weight of their shock hit me. Sweet justice doesn't just knock, it roars. Mayor Nguyen, recovering, laughed nervously. My apologies, Senator Olivia Harper, she said. Your leadership made this project possible. Please stand. I rose steady despite the chaos and nodded. I'm just here to support Franklin like always. The crowd applauded, but my family's faces told a different story: shock, confusion, and a dawning realization that their nobody had outshone their star. As the applause faded, reporters surged toward me, shouting questions. Senator, did you know about Ethan's fraud? Why hide your role? I kept my response brief. Tonight's about Franklin's achievements, not personal matters. But the damage was done. The gala's livestream went viral, racking up 200,000 views by midnight. Headlines screamed, Senator's secret, Ethan Harper's sister shocks gala. My parents, still seated, stared as if seeing me for the first time. Ethan's eyes met mine, not with his usual smirk, but with something new: disbelief, maybe respect. I slipped out a side exit where Nathan, my chief of staff, was waiting. Well, he said, Franklin knows who you are now. I nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. Outside, the Oregon night was crisp, the sound of waves faint from Franklin's coast. I drove home, replaying their faces. For 34 years, they'd written me off as the failure, the shadow to Ethan's light. Now, in one unplanned moment, the truth had shattered their narrative. The mayor's slip wasn't just a reveal, it was a reckoning. My parents had built a world where Ethan's $1 billion fund defined success, but I'd built something deeper. Laws protecting 30,000 Oregonians, projects saving miles of coastline, a legacy of impact over flash. Yet, as I parked in my driveway, a pang hit me. Not triumph, but sadness for the family we could have been if they'd seen me sooner. That gala night didn't just shock Franklin. It set the stage for what came next. Ethan's trial was days away, and my parents would face me again, not as their disappointment, but as the senator I'd become. The city watched, waiting to see if I'd bend for family or stand for justice. That choice and the fallout would change us forever. Stick with me to see how I faced my family, rebuilt what was broken, and turned Franklin's eyes to a truth they couldn't ignore. You've just seen how the mayor's slip at Franklin's gala exposed me as a state senator, shattering my family's view of me as their nobody. That moment, with 500 eyes on me and my parents' jaws dropped, was a reckoning. I'm Olivia Harper, 34, and this is where I faced my family in Franklin, Oregon, not as their disappointment, but as the woman I'd become. Ethan's trial for embezzling $25 million loomed, and the city watched, wondering if I'd bend. I didn't. Days after the gala, my parents, Robert and Catherine, showed up at my Senate office in Salem, 60 miles from Franklin. They looked smaller, their usual swagger gone. We didn't know, Mom said, voice trembling. Why didn't you tell us you were a senator? I met her eyes. Would it have mattered? You called my work quaint, my dreams a hobby. Dad shifted, uncomfortable. We thought Ethan was the future. We were wrong. Their words, raw and halting, cracked something in me. Not anger, but hope. Ethan asked to meet before his trial. We sat in a quiet Franklin cafe, 10 miles from the courthouse. He looked worn, the golden boy faded. I bought into their hype, he said. Thought I was untouchable. You? You built something real. His apology, clumsy but genuine, hit hard. I'm sorry, Olivia, for all of it. I took his hand. We lost years to their narrative. Let's not lose more. I promised to support his rehabilitation, not with favors, but through prison education programs I'd expand as a senator. As he left, he hugged me. A first in 20 years. Back home, I journaled. Family isn't fixed, but it can grow. My parents started small, attending a coastal cleanup I organized, their hands in the sand beside mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ethan's conviction came, a 7-year sentence. I grieved but stood by justice. Franklin saw me clearly now, not as Ethan's sister, but as their senator. Stick with me to see how I turned this into a legacy that redefined success for us all. You've seen how I faced my family after the gala's shock, rebuilding ties with my parents and Ethan in Franklin, Oregon on my own terms. That moment when they saw me as a state senator, not a nobody, was a turning point. I'm Olivia Harper, 34. And this is how I turned that reckoning into a legacy that redefined success for us all. After Ethan's 7-year sentence for embezzling $25 million, my parents, Robert and Catherine, joined my coastal cleanups, their hands sifting sand beside mine. They started volunteering at Franklin's food bank, 10 miles from their mansion, learning impact Trump's status. Ethan, from prison, wrote me letters taking online courses I'd pushed for as a senator. Our family wasn't perfect, but we were growing, rooted in purpose, not praise. I channeled that shift into my work, passing a $5 million bill for prison education, helping 3,000 inmates, including Ethan, rebuild their lives. I also launched a community task force in Franklin, training 200 locals to lead projects like the pier restoration that saved $1 million in tourism revenue. Success isn't titles or trophies. It's the difference you make. Want to live that? First, write down 3 values that drive you. Mine were justice, community, resilience, and let them guide your choices. Second, tune out naysayers. Their doubts are noise, not truth. Third, start small, volunteer 1 hour a week, mentor 1 person, plant 1 seed of change. Those steps build legacies. Franklin sees me now, not as Ethan's sister, but as Senator Harper, who protected 30 miles of coastline and empowered thousands. My parents attended my re-election rally, clapping with genuine pride. It's a start. What's your success story? Comment below, how do you define impact? Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories that spark change. Next up, how one choice reshaped Franklin's future. Stay tuned and chase your purpose, not anyone's applause.